The narrative occurs in 1981 in Gotham City. Joaquin Phoenix plays Arthur Fleck, a clown for hire who performs for ha-has. Although he suffers from severe melancholy, he finds some measure of hope in entertaining others and making them laugh. He has to dance and wave a sign around to advertise a store. On one of these occasions, a gang of punk teenagers steal the sign, leading Arthur to chase them into an alley. They violently kick him while he is on the ground after smashing the sign against his face. Gotham is now dealing with issues including poverty, unemployment, and crime. For both his medication and his ongoing mental health difficulties, Arthur sees a social worker. A young child observes Arthur as they travel home on the bus. The youngster finds it amusing when he makes funny faces, but his mother orders Arthur to leave the boy alone. Arthur breaks out in uncontrollable laughter. He hands the mother a card explaining that he has a mental illness that leads him to laugh in the manner that he does when she questions him. In a high-rise apartment complex, where he lives with his frail mother, Penny, Arthur goes home, Francis Conroy. They watch a TV discussion program with host Murray Franklin after dinner, Robert De Niro. Arthur visualizes himself being on the program and catching Murray's eye. Arthur charms Murray and the audience in his daydream by saying that he looks after his mother. Arthur and Murray embrace as a family on stage after Murray empathizes with him and welcomes him out there in front of everyone. It is revealed that Penny, who formerly worked for Thomas Wayne, Brett Cullen, has a rich crush and has been writing to him constantly in an effort to improve their living circumstances. After learning about the mugging event, Arthur's co-worker Randall, Glenn Fleshler, at Ha gives Haas him a gun for protection. Since guns are forbidden at work, Arthur is both hesitant and relieved to get such a present, but he soon notices that his confidence is rising as a result of getting the weapon. However, not long after, he is approached by his heartless and impersonal boss, who chastises him for misplacing the sign and deducts the money from his pay. Arthur simply smiles sourly in response. Arthur meets and falls in love with Sophie Dumond, a single mother who lives next door, Zazie Beetz. She addresses him gently and discusses topics that he can identify with. He appears awkward and strange around her, despite his attempts to make an impact. He spends his entire day pursuing her at one point. She visits his apartment later and inquires about if he was stalking her. He acknowledges that he was, but she doesn't appear to be offended. She receives an invitation to his stand-up comedy performance. Despite her reservations, his charm and sense of humor manage to win her over. Arthur watches comedians perform to learn more about the art, but he feels more uncomfortable and out of place because his exaggerated laughing is not sincere. To perform, Arthur goes to the comedy club. In an effort to cope, he unwittingly laughs so hard that he can hardly speak as his anxiety swallows him. He then starts his routine, which isn't all that humorous. The only audience member who appears to be giggling at Arthur's jokes is Sophie. This provides him with the solace he requires to carry on making jokes, despite his inner anguish and conflict. Later, as a clown, Arthur visits a children's hospital to amuse the kids there. His gun, which he had with him, drops to the ground. Later, Arthur's employer berates him for doing this. Although Arthur begs for a second opportunity, his supervisor rejects him and immediately fires him. To top it all off, Randall accuses Arthur of procuring the gun on his own, putting Arthur in a bad light. Arthur observes 3 inebriated young Wall Street types working for Wayne Enterprises harassing a woman on the subway train on the way home from Hallwell Haas, dressed as a clown. Unintentionally cracking up, Arthur catches the attention of the males while the woman, acting prudently, runs away from that car. Shocked at what he has done, Arthur retreats to a nearby public restroom. After a moment of frantic contemplation, he feels a surge of strength within him and begins to dance alone. At that moment, he sees himself in a dirty mirror as a battered, dirty but powerful clown and begins to hug him. To do. News of the 3 murders spreads, with some viewing it as an attack on the wealthy and others supporting the action. Thomas Wayne calls the lower classes clowns and denounces them aloud, a symbol they readily accept. The next day, Arthur cleans up his locker with a haha, but not before confronting Randall for betraying him and breaking the timestamp machine. Then he leaves, feeling cocky and free. News reports show clown riots protesting throughout the city, causing trouble and blaming more privileged people. He begins to understand his true potential, which really pleases him. Arthur later finds one of Penny's letters to Thomas, indicating that Arthur is Thomas's son. Arthur goes to Wayne Manor, where he meets a young Bruce Wayne, Dante Pereira Olson. After performing a magic trick for Bruce, he sticks his hand through the gate, making Bruce smile, deeply realizing that they may or may not be brothers. Hodge arrives to intervene and tells Arthur to leave. Arthur mentions his mother's relationship with Thomas. Alfred remembers Penny, but she lied to him. Arthur attacks Alfred and nearly strangles him through bars, only to find Bruce watching. Arthur then comes to Wayne's compound and flees. That night, Arthur finds Thomas at a public theater event. Arthur sneaks into the theater under the guise of a usher. He follows Thomas Wayne to the men's bathroom and tries to confront him about the possibility of him becoming a father. Arthur mentions Penny, whom Thomas also remembers. Thomas also admits that Penny worked for him as part of the household chores, but he says she was delusional and there was no way Arthur could be his son. He also explains that he never told Arthur that Penny was adopted, and Arthur denies it before laughing uncontrollably in Thomas's face. Get defensive and punch Arthur in the face before being thrown off the building. Arthur returns home and torments himself in a fit of depression and longing by banging his head against the refrigerator. The next day, two police officers, Burke, Shea Wiggum, and Garrity, Bill Camp, go to Arthur's apartment and reveal that the suspect was wearing clown makeup, proving that Arthur has lost. After I found out, I questioned him about the murder on the subway. His work earlier in the day. Arthur denies his involvement and has the detective leave. Shortly thereafter, Penny becomes ill and is hospitalized. Sophie sits next to her while Arthur takes care of her mother. At the hospital, Arthur sees Murray's TV show playing a clip of his stand-up routine, but she is hurt to see that Murray only played him to make fun of Arthur. Arthur later received a call from a representative for Murray's show. He was invited to appear as a guest, which Arthur reluctantly accepted. After studying other interviews on a comedy show, Arthur decided to commit suicide in front of a live audience, believing it would make them laugh. Seeking hard evidence, Arthur goes to Arkham's asylum and tells an employee named Carl, Brian Tyree Henry, who has Penny's file. When Carl says he can't give Arthur the information he needs, Arthur grabs the file and runs off to read it. Disappearing and hiding in the stairwell, Arthur opens the document, reads it, and realizes that Thomas was telling the truth, according to the document. In reality, Penny adopted Arthur after he was found abandoned as a baby and she abused him, tied him to a heater and beat him up with her abusive boyfriend. Part of the file states that Arthur suffered a head injury, which probably caused his laughing state. But he thinks it's a fucking comedy. This causes him to choke Penny to death. Arthur returns home and breaks into Sophie's apartment. She was horrified to see him and asked him to leave for her daughter's sake. Arthur asks her if she had a really bad day and she replies she doesn't know. This reveals that all the other moments with Sophie were in Arthur's head. Heartbroken and frustrated, Arthur apologizes for his intrusion and storms out of the apartment, leaving Sophie alone. Arthur prepares to appear on Murray's show and puts on white makeup. He is visited at his apartment by Randall and another former employee, a dwarf named Gary Lee Gill. They offer their condolences after hearing about Penny's death, but Randall proceeds to say that Burke and Garrity are going to the apartment to question them about the subway murders. Realizing that Randall was just looking for a way to cover his own ass with Arthur, Arthur snapped and brutally stabbed Randall in the face twice before smashing his head into the wall. A frightened Gary questions Arthur's actions and demands his release. Arthur agrees, before playfully scaring him off as a prank. Gary tries to unlock Arthur's door, but is unable due to his size. He asks Arthur to open the door for him. Arthur readily agrees, pausing to thank Gary for being the only person in his life who has been kind to him. Arthur kisses Gary on the forehead and lets go. Arthur then dyes his hair green, puts on full his clown makeup, and changes into a burgundy suit. He then dances down the stairs, embracing his madness and carefree life. Burke and Garrity find Arthur dancing in the street and move to arrest him. Arthur runs, and they chase him into the subway. There, inspired by the murders, dozens of other Gothamians dress up like clowns. Arthur hides his face with a clown mask, steals from protesters, and accidentally starts a fight on a train. As the detectives pursue Arthur, the clown gets in the way and Burke accidentally shoots him while fighting with guns. The clown drags the detective out of the subway and begins beating him relentlessly, allowing Arthur to escape and smooth over the police force that populates the area. At the television station, Arthur meets Murray and his agent Mark Maron. Before continuing, Arthur asks Murray to introduce him as Joker. This is because Murray called him out when he played the clip. Murray asked Arthur if there was any political intent behind his clown makeup, to which Arthur replied, "I don't think so." We see sending clips of Arthur struggling to try, which changes Arthur's mind and plans, and he dances into the spotlight. As the show begins, Arthur exits. He awkwardly tells Murray jokes that no one else does, but finds funny because of his dark humor. After being confronted, Arthur begins to admit to the subway murders. Murray and the audience are beginning to realize that Arthur means business. Arthur claims that the audience only cares about the victim because Thomas Wayne spoke on behalf of the victim, but others, like Arthur, are ignored and run over. Murray and the audience get mad at Arthur, but so does Arthur. Murray scolds Arthur, which escalates to Arthur, tells another joke, and grins gleefully. What if you cross a psychotic loner with a society that dumps him and treats him like garbage? He asks only for Murray to try and get him out before calling the cops. Enraged, Arthur yells, "You get what you deserve," before blowing Murray's brains out in front of everyone. The audience flees, horrified, and news of the murder quickly spills over the airwaves. For the first time in his life, Arthur really laughed. Gotham is attacked by rebellious citizens dressed as clowns after hearing what Arthur has done. Mr. and Mrs. Wayne leave the movie theater to discover chaos in the streets. Thomas takes his wife Martha, Carrie her Louise her Torero, and Bruce down an alleyway, but a clown follows the two of him and Marley uses the punchline Arthur uses in Franklin's show. "Tell Thomas that you got what you deserve." With this, he shoots Thomas and Martha before Bruce. Meanwhile, Arthur is arrested and taken into custody by the police. Arthur looks out the window and laughs happily at the destruction and chaos he has caused. At that moment, a clown hits a car with an ambulance, killing a police officer and freeing an injured and unconscious Arthur. Upon waking, Arthur finds himself surrounded by a mob of cheering gangsters in clown masks. The mob cheers as Arthur stands over the car and accepts their praise. He received the long-awaited recognition. He dances to their cheers and stops when he realizes that his nose is bleeding profusely. He then spreads blood on his upper lip and stands before them with a smirk, like a god. Dignified. Some time later, Arthur is imprisoned in his asylum in Arkham. After telling this story, he laughs and imagines young Bruce standing in the alley above his parents. Realizing that he had turned Bruce into himself, Arthur laughed even harder, feeling really hilarious. He meets a new social worker, April Grace, and says he wants to joke with her, but she doesn't get it. A few minutes later, Arthur left the room, leaving bloody footprints before being chased by orderly people.